Evening, everyone. I'd like to call the April 7th, 2023, Solid Committee meeting order. Agnes, you will be following. Here.
Shane,
Here.
Piniac Costello, here, McCollum. Lopez, here, Sikorowski,
Here.
Labrie.
Here. Yes, thank you. Sean, do we have anybody on Zoom?
The Polycom set.
I'm sorry.
Just a Polycom set.
Oh, okay, all right, okay, thank you, okay. In addition, we have Sean from IT. We have our two attorneys, we have Dan Garvey, we have Tim Riley. And we also have Patrick, and we also have Lee from planning. We have a council president, we have, the plan, also have a ward six representative, we have their, we also have Greg Grant is here. And we have Alice from, our administrators from the office. Okay. I think I got everything here. Okay. All right. In compliance with open meeting laws, the city of Chicopee is recording this meeting. There's anyone else in the audience in the video are taking this meeting. And so please state your name and organization. So, okay. All right. Okay, we're going to move on. I'd like to also reference housekeeping procedure. If anybody has their cell phones that have been silenced, please silence or put your phones in place. Okay. And for public input, speaking will be limited to 3 minutes. Please address the chair. No instructions on collective bargaining issues. Personalities of personnel attack. Okay, I think we're ready to start. One of the councilors said reference to me taking an item out of order. So go ahead.
Take a motion to take another matter.
Well, number 6 is okay, you guys follow us. Sure.
Yep, number 6.
Okay, all right. Okay, so you made the motion and I will sign here. And we have a roll call that and
LaCare,
yes.
Shane,
Yes.
Piniac Costello,
Yes.
Lopez, Sikorowski,
Yes.
Labrie.
Yes. Okay. Okay, now we just into our agency to the record. This is item 6 on the agenda. This is item number 6. Ordinance amendment to chapter 275-66A Road. The new chapter 275-66A is entirety and certain place thereof. Chapter 275-66A Road, Section 8. No further business, commercial, or industrial development shall occur on Granite Road. The board the intersection of our road, Granite Road, for a period of 1 year, commencing on April 1st, 2023, and terminating on April 1st, 2024. Let's see what we have for the next time. It looks like we have a planning board recommendation ordinance amendment. Chapter 275-66A, Granite Road, file number 23-7703. The Chicopee Planning Board held a public hearing on Thursday, April 6th, 2023. The purpose of the hearing was to consider an amendment to chapter 275-66A Granite Road. The applicant is Councilor Eric Villas or 6. The applicant addressed City Council office, City Hall Managed, 274 Concord, Chicopee, Mass. Illinois. We have the extension or this proposal on Granite Road. This, I'm just gonna mention a couple of things and then talk. They're up to, our fire was gonna shift some light on this before they open it up to public comment. This has been going on for a long time. Actually, I believe since 1999. And basically, this goes through the council once a year. They get voted on, up and down, and this is the way it was going. So tonight, we will have to consider if we're denying the extension or if we're going to approve the extension. And without further ado, let's see, I'll stop my comments. And I'm gonna let our planner discuss this interest going. Will you go ahead?
Thank you, Councilor. May I pass out a map?
Yes, sir, go ahead.
Let's see if one of those shows.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Councilor, for the opportunity to speak on this. I'd like to start with giving a little bit of context on how the tool of a zoning moratorium is intended to function, but its purposes and how this particular moratorium has functioned over time. Massachusetts zoning enabling act, which gives municipalities the ability to develop zoning ordinances, does allow for communities to consider what is termed zoning moratoriums. And they're meant to be temporary pauses in development so that communities can address an emergency situation with new regulations or additional regulations in a specified period of time so that the issue can be addressed and then development can move forward based on what the zoning districts in that area that a moratorium may apply to allow. When I look for guidance on these types of regulations, I often refer back to the Massachusetts Land Use and Planning Law Guide, which sets out case law on what the courts have upheld and what they have not. The issue of moratorium is discussed. And the reference case is Kalura versus Town of Arlington, where the courts upheld a 2-year moratorium. In this case, it applied to the construction of apartment buildings in certain districts until Arlington could pass particularly new regulations to deal with that type of development. So no opposition from staff perspective to using moratoriums. They are a tool and they are used regularly, but the courts have said that it is intended for emergency situations to address a situation and move on. The Burnett Road moratorium here is specific to addressing the negative impact of increasing traffic. And specifically says until such time the city takes measures to manage traffic in the area. There are 2 components to that from a planning perspective. There's the existing traffic volume. And I think we can all agree that Burnett Road is a major corridor that connects Ludlow and Chicopee, which also provides access to the Mass Pike, which is a state highway system. The second piece is speed and management of that, which it's no secret to anyone in this room is a problem. And so the question is whether or not zoning code is the place to manage traffic, and if this has been successful since 1999. I would argue that because it has been renewed every year, that we have not solved the traffic problem, and therefore land use regulation is not the appropriate way to do this. Additionally, the renewal of this ordinance on a yearly basis, now going on 24 years, has the effect of being permanent, which cannot have a permanent ban on development of by right uses in our zoning districts. And so the planning board and staff's opposition to this is not that we're opposed to the use of moratorium as a tool. We're opposed to it being a permanent ban, which could set the city up for legal action in the future. The map that I passed out for reference, we did this with Shelley, our GIS coordinator, a couple of years ago when we had this conversation. There are a total of 460 properties on Memorial Drive that are either front on Memorial Drive or on a connecting street to Memorial Drive. 460. If we delete all of the residentially zoned parcels, we are talking about 42 parcels, which is only 9% of the parcels in the neighborhood. Those subject parcels have a red star on the map. The majority of those are already developed or are not developable, one of the largest being the now closed landfill off of New Lombard. And as you're all aware, we passed a special permit under the moratorium for the proposed Tesla dealership, which was one of the last undeveloped parcels in the neighborhood. So we don't disagree that traffic speed is certainly a problem and it's not unique to Burnett Road. But we would argue that we cannot address traffic speed issues with land use regulation. It's primarily an enforcement issue, and then it is a design issue, an engineering issue for how the street is laid out, and therefore how the design of the street controls traffic. So if we're really serious about dealing with traffic issues, our efforts and resources would be better spent focusing on enforcement and street design versus adding in this extra questionably legal step for by right uses within the neighborhood.
All right, thank you very much. What I'd like to do now is, I'd like to open up public input. I'm not sure if anybody's here for public input. So again, for public input, you're going to speak to the chair and the personal tax. Is anyone out in the audience here for public input? Just check to see. Sean, anybody on Zoom? Okay. All right. I will let the counselors speak after, but I want to do the question first. Okay. So it looks like we have all here for public input. So I'm going to take. I think can we still have to take a vote to close public input?
If you want to close it first, yes.
Okay, then before we have like counselor, the word counselor speak and then counselor. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna make a motion to close the input. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll make a recommendation. I'll make a motion for this. Okay, I'll say that. Okay, thank you. All right, thanks.
Valakir,
Yes.
Moshe,
Yes.
Pena Costello,
Yes.
Lopez,
Yes.
Zagorowski.
Yes.
Labrie.
Yes. Okay, all right, thank you.
Do I need to make a motion and then? So motion to approve the moratorium.
Okay, so it looks like, Council Doris, we'll let you open up the cat area.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. I'll only speak once. I won't get too far in the weeds. I want to thank the board for the side board for me. So where do I begin here? Yeah, this is very important. I feel almost uncomfortable on the moratorium, right? This language allows the city council to negotiate with developers. So for example, we approved the Tesla dealership. I was for the Tesla dealership. I'm still for the Tesla dealership. We approved it. They worked with us. This language allowed us to negotiate with the developer to make that development safe for the neighborhood. Now I agree this only affects few parcels. Mainly the Deegan's parcel is basically the one that we're mainly looking at. And I do agree there should be a business there, there was a business there, there should be a business there. I'm not looking to block development of Burnett Road, I'm just looking for a tool to make it safer for the neighbors. You know, we can negotiate with the developer in the scope of traffic with this language. So I strongly encourage the board to approve this. I also want to point out that this goes to ordinance after this committee. This is not the final vote. This goes to ordinance. And so I encourage residents to show up to ordinance. And I also want to point out that I'm not seeking re-election. So also I think this is very extra important because you have a new city councilor coming into the board. This language should help him. Even if you disagree with the moratorium, this will help him for his first 6 months in office. You won't, have a little bit more wiggle room to work with, rather than just getting thrown into the weeds. So I hope the board takes it seriously. It's not to block development. The city planner said it, if the city wants to put more effort into planning for this street, then maybe the moratorium will be needed in the future. But the city's done essentially nothing to control traffic and redesigning of the road to make it safer traffic wise. So until that happens, I recommend this would be approved. Thank you.
Okay, all set, all right. Well, sorry, before I'll let the council try to involve, we have some. Go ahead.
No, and it would be helpful to have council weigh on this and on this too. So the legal concern that we have from the planning world is that the city does have a zoning code. It lays out zoning districts, and within each of those districts, we determine what our by right uses and what our special permit uses. And the legal question that comes in line with requiring a special permit through this moratorium is that by right uses are just that, they're by right. We should not be requiring an extra permit for them because the city's guiding regulation, which is the zoning code, has already determined what the appropriate uses are within the zoning district. So when a by right use is held up or negotiated, luckily with Tesla, we had a very, collaborative entity that didn't decide to take the hard road. But there should be no question about a by right use, and then the city is relying on its site plan regulations to deal with layouts and other things. When it comes to how much traffic a development may generate, planning board relies on the city's experts, which is DPW and engineering, to look at those things, determine if we need to do intersection improvements, and then negotiate those items with either the state or the developer themselves, which is somewhat the process that happened with the previous mixed-use development at the proposed pilot area. So I don't want the council to feel like there's no control if those types of issues arise. I would just caution you that for by right uses within the zoning code, you should not be negotiated. And I would just suggest you might want legal counsel on that.
Okay, all right, thank you. I am going to ask for legal counsel before I open up the counselors so they can just get their perspective as well. Thank you. Dan, could we get some legal perspective on this?
Sure, I guess the best thing that you found is that if the ordinance is challenged, then the city of Chicopee will defend the city and any challenge.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Okay, Dan. Thank you. Okay. I think there were a couple hands up. I think councilors with your hands up. First, go ahead here.
Yeah, through the chair to Leah. Do you think over the years, somebody would call and look to develop something on Burnett Road and moratorium may have been mentioned? Do you think that was a deterrent for them to maybe not look at Burnett Road and go elsewhere?
It's certainly possible. I mean, so it's no secret in the development world, time is money. So developers are generally looking for project sites where they have a streamlined understanding of the permitting process and what they can project from beginning to end. Historically, my predecessor, Kate Brown, worked really hard with our departments and the council to establish our site plan review process. Where instead of developers having to go department by department on their own, we negotiate that to our site plan review advisory committee and bring everyone to one meeting. And so that cut a significant amount of time out of our review process and also created synergies between departments, because sometimes what planning is looking for when reviewing is not what engineering is looking for when reviewing. But when we're sitting at the table together, we layer those comments together and often find solutions or additional issues that need to be addressed. So the fact that we layer on a special permit for a by right use that would traditionally just be site plan review is time, and it would definitely have the developer consider an alternative area, whether it's in the city or in another. Can I point to a direct project? No, but I can certainly, I've worked with enough developers to understand the connection between time and money.
Right, and a special permit takes at least 3 months before it makes zoning.
Correct, and the special permit through this would just allow them to move forward, so they haven't invested in development of site plans yet, which would be the next step, and if it's an undeveloped lot, so for example, Tesla, they have to do both preliminary and definitive, so you can assume 3 months for each of those packages, and in the case of Tesla, if there's any conservation adjacency, they may have to also go to the Conservation Commission, which is another 2 months tacked on at the beginning, because the planning board likes to wait for the Conservation Commission to do their piece first. So we're already looking at an 8 to 9 month process just to do traditional site plan review, and we're adding potentially 3 months for the special permit process.
Thank you.
You're all set there? Okay, keep us to the point. No, you're all set? Yeah. Okay, other councilors on the table? Councilor Krampus?
All set, thank you.
Okay. Mary Beth, you're all set? Well, I thought we were gonna have a Roman scroll with questions and reviews. Okay, Councilor Rose, go ahead.
We constantly hear about traffic all over the city. Now, I remember somebody that people emphasize that road, the city doing nothing. So, what would be your solution to Burnett Road and the traffic?
Do you want me to, I'll be very honest. Burnett Road is designed as a highway.
Right.
And that when you have wide open views and a straight line, that is an increase in speed. So the best solution that we've come up with to control speed would be to think about design interventions that force people to slow down. And what we're looking at in planning, and hopefully working with the mayor to bring to the council in the future, is looking at the design interventions that come with complete streets. Where we narrow drive aisles and increase pedestrian spaces. And that is, it's where a lot of regions are going. The state supports it. We can get funding through the state to create complete streets. But right now, it's a highway. So it's really a design and engineering solution that we need. If we really want to fix the speeding problem, then we need to redesign the street.
All right, okay, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, you just.
To redesign that street, would it? It's time for the future, your perspective as a planner. Would that have to require land taking?
I don't know what the current right of way width is, but just based on the current layout, I don't think we would. I think we could work within what is already owned as public right of way.
So there is some type of solution,
Yeah,
possibly in the future.
it's a design solution, absolutely.
That seems to be something people always ask, what are we gonna do about Burnett Road?
Yeah, I think the council has seen and funded temporary interventions on Front Streets with the speed tables and on Chicopee Street. We increase space for pedestrians and bicycles and deprioritize the car and give it less space. Those interventions tend to slow traffic speeds. I think we have to admit that the traffic volume is the traffic volume. I mean, there's no disconnecting that street from Ludlow. We know that it's a passive. But we can certainly better design the street, to function the way we want it to.
So in your opinion, the moratorium should be abolished?
Yeah, yes, I don't think it doesn't achieve the purpose for which we're trying. And I think we would be better spent working with DPW and engineering and talking about a design solution to the street.
Okay, thank you.
Also, okay, all right, I think Mary Beth, the next minute, not to put a shade in. Go ahead, Mary Beth.
At every meeting, there's public input by a certain individual who is extremely concerned about traffic and redesigning streets. This is what this particular constituent of mine comes to every meeting, and she's disappointed that we haven't applied for a program going back to 2016 in regards to streets, safety, and pedestrians. And she says it publicly on TV. And she's an engineer, and she's articulate, and she's not given up. As a matter of fact, she wants, when we do our reviews in regards to zone changes, she feels that we should get information on traffic, that it would be something that would be informative on our decision-making for zone change. So have we applied for a safe street grant or program that some communities have already bought into? And this goes back, I believe the speaker says 2016. I don't know if the other counselors pick up on what Mrs. Bienvenue is saying, but basically that's what she's saying. So if you get part of this program, you can get grant money to redesign streets so that streets become safer. So can you shed some light on that? Because that's something that we hear on a regular basis.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sure.
Go ahead.
So yeah, I think there are two programs that I'm familiar with that your constituent may be talking about. The first, there's a program called Safe Routes to School. That's an implementation program that DPW has pursued in the past, and I believe they received maybe 2 or 3 awards over a period of time. Don't quote me on that number, but I know that they have applied to that in the past. And then there is the Safe Complete Streets program.
Right.
There's a multi-step process to become designated as a complete streets community. We have completed step 1. We have not moved forward with step 2 yet, because we wish to ensure from a planning perspective that our complete streets policy draft that we bring to the mayor and ultimately to the city council is consistent with our comprehensive plan for the city once it's adopted. So my staff has been working on a draft of a complete streets policy, but do understand that that policy will have to be adopted by the council. And that it impacts how we design and redesign all streets moving forward. So it is a permanent and long-term commitment. And then there's a third phase of the full adoption process. And once you are designated as a complete street community, then you can access the state funds that assist with design and implementation. And I believe implementation grants per project max out at $500,000. So there's not significant money when you're thinking about full reconstruction of a street, but in our case, you know, we would tackle any funding sources that we were eligible for. So I don't want the council to think it's a funding source we haven't gone after. There's been a strategy in how we approach it, and we want our policy statement to match up with our guiding planning documents.
What is your recommendation? Should we proceed with the next 2 phases of the Safe Complete Streets program?
Absolutely.
Okay, so you're in favor.
There's no reason not to be thinking about complete streets at this point. Any state funding that comes to the city for streets require complete streets. We know it's needed in our urban centers and our retail and commercial districts. Cannot deny that, people are moving around in bikes. I actually saw electric scooters in the city, last week, so people are using alternative modes of transportation. We've opened one significant leg of the Connecticut River Walk down in Willimantic. We're aggressively pushing to complete the design and get the Chicopee River Walk done. We'd like to see those connected and then connected into neighborhoods. So, you know, are there pros and cons to making the commitment? Yes, but I think in the long term, it's a benefit to the city.
So how do we encourage the continuation of the levels? You said that you've done level 1, Lee, and now we've got to look at level 2.
So
I'm sorry.
my anticipation would be that, once we complete the adoption of the comprehensive plan, we will work with the mayor on a final draft of the streets policy, which would need to be presented to the city council for adoption.
How long would that adoption plan be?
The adoption of the comprehensive plan, the process will begin July 13th. That's when the planning board will receive the comprehensive plan. They're planning for at least 30-day public comment period before making any final tweaks to the document and voting to adopt it. And then I would also hope to work with the mayor to bring the plan to the council for an endorsement. So we're looking probably in the August, September timeframe for complete adoption.
That's excellent. So you're well on your way and you're moving forward. Thank you.
Well, Senator Beth,
Thank you.
okay, Councilor, Commissioner Nick.
So, yeah, and just so I'll defend Lee, I guess you could say, it since I've been on the board for 8 years, that was one of the first things we ever talked about was complete. This is something he's been after for a long time. It's just, it takes a long time, and he also puts it into his thought process when he's thinking about things. But we may not be officially as complete, but it's in his theory and thoughts when he's planning things out. But at the end of the day, this moratorium is about speed. It's not about anything but traffic. The residents on Burnett Road don't want to have additional traffic. They're next to commute time. And that's what they've said in all their meetings. And I've had his concern, just reach out to me. We were, you know, there, done a lot of stuff. And it just comes down to not wanting to burden with extra traffic on the street. It's not about speed, it's just about convenience. So that's something to remember too.
Okay, all set? Okay, Councilor.
So I think both things could be true, right? It could be about convenience as well as speed, and I agree that we do need to solve the design issues. We need to do something about it, but in the meantime, I'm not comfortable with just not voting for this moratorium, because then you just leave that area just like free, it's a free for all, right? And we're not protecting them at all from being able to have a say in what goes into that when there's already speed issues, there's already traffic issues, and it's no secret to us that we do absolutely want economic development on Burnett Road. And most of the residents I've spoken to are not against economic development, they just want the right development. They want development that fits into the community and it's not going to cause more traffic issues. And if we're being honest, if we think even about the Tesla conversations, right? If we didn't have this moratorium, we would not have been able to negotiate with Tesla and the way we were able to negotiate, because they would have had a by right use and we would not have been able to ask them to decrease the size of their development. And I think it was necessary for us to ask them to decrease and have that conversation with them, because the residents were very concerned about that. And we were also concerned about what it would do to the traffic in that area. So I am in favor of this moratorium. I do not believe that because it's been enacted it's been renewed for 24 years, but this now makes it permanent. Because if it was permanent, we wouldn't be voting on it tonight. We're voting on it because it's not permanent, and we get to decide whether we want to vote on it every single year. And I'm in favor of it. Thank you.
Second time.
Through the chair, Lee, in the process, like planning all those things, would we have been able to have any control over that development where it is today?
There are controls in place.
Could we have said, no, we don't want 48 days, we want 20? Everything we did in the special permit, could we have done that through the regular process?
The planning board could have had that same negotiation, and I would argue it's questionable whether or not the restrictions that the council placed on that special permit will hold up in a protocol. Because the Tesla dealership itself is a by right use, it's not a special permit use.
Right.
The special permit is only required because it falls within a boundary.
But we wouldn't, so
established.
if we didn't have a special permit, we couldn't have encouraged them to come up with an alternative, they could have just did what they wanted. We would have had
Well, the
no.
planning board could have had, the planning board could have had the same negotiation. I think.
Right. So they could have said, we want half the side.
Right, and they would
They would have to
have,
go
they
back.
will still hear public comment on both the preliminary and the definitive plan sets for that project.
Just for the record, they actually came up with the restrictions, we never put it.
Correct, and I anticipate they probably would have downsized after the preliminary plan based on the public feedback that would come.
I would push back a little bit on the comments about how this wouldn't hold up in a court of law. We don't know what would happen in a court of law, that's why the court of law exists. And also, I think that we should leave that to the attorneys to decide what they think our case would be, if we even had to go that far. However, I agree with Councilor Duchesne, we didn't even come up with the final restrictions per se, this was amicable. And although, yes, the planning board could have potentially had their own hearing and come up with restrictions themselves and have that conversation, there's no guarantee to that, right? And so as duly elected officials of the city, as councilors, particularly when we have a councilor who represents that specific neighborhood and ward, and at-large councilors who also represent that specific neighborhood and ward, I think it's important to have this extra layer of conversation. We, unlike the planning board, are actually, you know, we are elected by these residents, you know, like they put us in these positions to watch out for their best interests, and we answer to them. And so at the end of the day, I am completely in favor of this extra added layer in this particular area of our city. It's not like if we were putting a moratorium on all economic development in all of the city, then that to me would be outrageous, right? But there's a clear and evident need for this moratorium in this particular area. And, you know, I've heard the planning director say that there's only a few parcels of land left on this area that are underdeveloped. Well, great, then that means maybe in a few years, we won't need this moratorium because we won't have to deal with, you know, underdeveloped parcels in this land. But in the meantime, while the residents still have valid concerns, I think it's important for us to keep this moratorium until we fix the road design issues. We cannot take this out. It is a Band-Aid, it's absolutely a Band-Aid, this is not a fix. But the Band-Aid needs to happen because otherwise, I think it's actually more like a tourniquet, right? We're gonna stop the bleeding here. Otherwise, we're gonna bleed out. And this is dire for some residents. Like, you know, the planning director and myself, we don't live in that neighborhood. So we don't have to see every single day what these residents have to see in terms of traffic. We don't have a harder commute because of development. But I hear the residents who live there and I hear the concerns about the traffic. I hear the concerns about the safety and the speeding. And because I hear their concerns, I think their concerns are valid. And I think we have a duty to take action in a way that protects their interests because they're the ones who live there. And so I push back against the fact that this wouldn't hold up in a court of law. I personally think that if we're giving opinions here, that might actually hold up pretty well because they were the ones who suggested these restrictions, not even the council. But again, even myself as someone who is an attorney, I wouldn't even make that determination or try to actually take a wild guess on that because I'm not the attorney who would actually be protecting the city. And we heard from our city attorney, that no matter what happens, the city attorneys will protect the city and will try their best to argue on behalf of the city. So I'm comfortable with this moratorium. Thank you.
Okay, all set? Okay. Anybody else for another round, or I think we're reaching a point. We've had an interesting perspective on this. Again, this has been going on for 4 years. It's been just happened last year. It's been going on for a long time. We've got some different perspectives, different opinions. So I think
The motion on the floor, Alfred. So you can take a roll call.
so. I think that we'll move this to approve. The motion to deny.
But the motion is on the floor, so you just have to take a roll call.
Okay. All right.
Vote first.
I already made it. The motion is on the floor to approve. You just roll.
Okay. All right. I'll second it, and we'll have a roll call
Valakir,
vote. No.
Duchesne,
Yes.
Pena Costello,
Yes.
Lopez,
Yes.
Zegarowski,
No.
Labrie,
No.
So it looks like we have a split situation. Let me have a sidebar with council for a minute.
You probably would.
Sorry, it's defeated, but it goes up to the council. It's an unfavorable. But again, it's the council that decides.
Okay, talking with council, this is gonna have to go to for full council, but we're gonna need 7 votes. So right now, it's a motion to. At this point, because we're 3-3. So. Right, this up is motion to approve, and so it's gonna be either, we're gonna have to either like favorable or unfavorable, so I'm just write this.
But the motion isn't denied, the motion is supposed to approve, and then it just doesn't pass. So it's still written as a motion to approve.
Right.
And then it just gets a.
Right, motion to approve, right, and then
Yeah.
if you're on the favorable side, so if you're on
My.
Yeah.
It could be on the long run.
Okay, so it's what it's also, okay. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, this is finished. Okay, so the motion is on the floor to approve the English proposal. 3 in favor, against, and so this will go before the full city council on June 20th. All right. Okay, I think I'm gonna make a recommendation that we go back to the regular order of business because we have some people here. Radio. So it's not looking at that motion. Okay, and I'll second that. Agnes, please call the roll.
Valakir,
Yes.
Hushain,
Yes.
Pena Costello.
Yes.
Lopez.
Yes.
Zagorowski.
Yes.
Aubrey.
Yes.
Okay. Regular order of business, okay. Item number 1, home occupation application at 45 Marion Street. For the purpose of doing business in the capacity of growing microgreens in the vicinity to sell at farmers market. Applicant is Jericho Rosa, 45 Marion Street, Chicopee, Mass. 01013, the applicant here. Okay, sir, could you please work your way up to the microphone and state your name and your address and what your proposal is for the home occupation application.
My name is Derek Rosa, 45 Marion Street, first floor. And I'm applying for a home occupation license. I want to start a business, growing microgreens. I don't know if people over here know what microgreens are, but
Could you just explain what that is, please?
This young-
microgreens, they're like the adolescent form of vegetables. And they're more nutrition dense than the actual mature version of the vegetable. And they are very healthy for you. I can, the way I want to grow them, I have a hallway that I painted with mold resistant paint. And I have a wire rack of 4 shelves with grow lights. So I grow them indoors on 10 by 20 trays. And I just only use soil, water, and the grow lights with non-GMO seeds.
Okay, thank you. Quick question. How long have you been doing this, sir? You know this, and you've been doing this for a while?
I started on February.
Okay, well, February of this year.
Yes,
Okay, and how are they coming out? Are they growing fairly well?
yes. Each so far I've grown cilantro, radish, peas, broccoli, kale, and arugula. And one that's it's kind of like, it's called popcorn. It's just corn shoots, but like grow with no light, so they're kind of have like a sweet taste to it.
All right, no, that sounds good. Well, you have quite a many. Does it look like you have clients also?
Yes, I currently sell in Northampton's farmers markets, but I would like to do that in Chicopee as well, since I live here. And I've gotten a couple of people in the farmers market who are chefs and people who own organic stores. They give me their business cards and say, as soon as like you're up and running officially, just give us a call. So I'm really hoping that this goes well.
Okay. All right, thank you. Okay, what I'd like to do is I'd just like to read some departmental reports into the record that we have, and then get some perspectives from me, and then we'll open it up. All right, so you can have a seat, sir. Thank you. Okay, let me take a look and see what we have here. We have some reports, departmental reports into the record. This is from engineering. It says there are no engineering comments. Okay. And then we have something from the planning director. I'll just read this into the record. Home occupation license review for 45 Marion Street. Council Ballakira, applicant is requesting a home occupation license. Property is zone residential A. Home occupation use in this district may be granted through a special permit by the city council under chapter 275, section 52, subsection B11. Please note this application is not complete. And stamp plans are not received by the planning department prior to submission. Planning cannot determine how the proposed microgreen is grown will occur within a residential structure and refers review to house building and fire. And this is from the fire department. Need more information / plans for the microgreen grow operation. Size, location in the house, lighting, as well as current fire protection system in the house. For everyone here. This was by Bill, and says the yard is small, it will be done inside the home. I think the applicant reference is going to be doing something inside the home. Now, let me see, there's also a couple of documents in here. This is from owner resident at 24 Marion Street. Hello, I am a resident of Chicopee at 24 Marion Street. I am unable to participate in my zoning meetings on June 7th. But if possible, I'd like to make a very simple written support. The home occupation proposal for Jerry Rose at 45 Marion Street. I believe that support of local farming initiatives and small business is one of the main core factors for making Chicopee a good place to live. I wholeheartedly support our neighbor Jericho proposal. I think it's an excellent use of our property and our street. I wish the best endeavors. I hope the zoning commission will grant the request. Thank you, Stephen. Local owner resident 24 Maryland Street, Chicopee. I think I saw something else in here. So I'm just reviewing this. Okay, this is from the property owner Brian, to whom it all may concern. I am ready to provide consent to my tenant, Jericho Rosa, to operate a business from their rented unit located at 45 Maryland Street, Chicopee, Mass. 01113. I have reviewed the nature of Jericho's business and have determined that it is not hazardous to the property or to the health and safety of other tenants. Additionally, I've been assured that Jericho will comply with all applicable laws and regulations related to the business. I appreciate your attention to this matter. I look forward to your approval of Jericho's business operations on the property. It's like dated March 17, 2023. Okay, I think that's all I have in terms of documentation reports in the file. That's it. I think I'm just going to ask if there's anything further that you have in planning before I open it up.
Sure, just following up on my memo, so we did receive the plans following our submission of this to the council office, so you don't have to worry about that. See the plans, and then in general, planning department is very supportive of agricultural projects like this. And you know, I would suggest that the council consider just having some sort of inspection with health, fire, and building, so they can ensure that the interior space being used is.
Right, no, you're right, Lee, thank you. I was going to make that recommendation. Thank you, Harley. Okay, councilors. Councilor Plum, actually, no. Okay, all right, restriction. Okay, councilor at the table. Question, councilor, go ahead.
Yeah, I think this is great. I'm a big fan of microgreens personally. I get them usually at the farmers market, especially when we have our farmers market. There's usually a lady who has her microgreens businesses out of East Long Meadow, so I'm happy to share the wealth of the Chicopee business. I wish you luck on your business, and I hope that we do follow the recommendation to have a health, building, and fire inspection. But as long as everything's clear and good to go, congratulations, and I hope it goes well.
Okay, all set, councilor?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Go ahead, councilor.
Thanks, Chairperson Valentine. I support this. And I applaud this family for taking the initiative to do this type of farming that will benefit the city. I'm very happy that Planner Pouliot did indicate that he's in favor of it, that he did receive the information he needed. Thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you. I'm sorry, thank you for the input. Also, I'd like to mention public input. Does anybody here in the audience regarding public input for 45 Maryland Street? Okay, and Sean, there's nobody on Zoom? No. All right. Well, again, Dan, should we go through just to make sure it's on the record? Sure. Okay. All right, I'll take a vote to close. Okay, I'll second that. Okay. Agnes, please call the roll.
Valakir,
Yes.
Hushain,
Yes.
Piniac Costello.
Yes.
Lopez.
Yes.
Zegarowski.
Yes.
Labrie.
Yes.
Motion to approve the special permit with restrictions being that they must submit a inspection by health, building, and fire department.
Okay, then we'll have, I'll just tweet this and then inspection.
Yeah, approval by health, fire, yeah.
Okay, all right, okay, let's see. Okay, all right, Agnes, you want to call the roll, please?
Valakir,
Yes.
Hushain.
Yes.
Piniac Costello.
Yes.
Lopez.
Yeah.
Zegarowski.
Yes.
Labrie.
Yes. I'll just write this in.
While he writes that up, this goes before the full council at our next council meeting. So this is just the first step, and then you'll also have to get an inspection by the health, fire, and building department. In order for us to be able to actually approve it, then, so I would recommend, calling the health, fire and building department. You can get those set up. If possible, so preferably we get those things done prior to the next city council meeting and submit that, let us know, you can just send an email to the council office, then you can actually just get it approved on the floor, to get that done.
That would be June 20th.
Those are Tuesday night, at 6:30 is the briefing, 7:15 is the meeting itself, it's downstairs, not where I'm upstairs.
Satisfactory inspection. Ladies and gentlemen, still dealing with that.
Things we think, but it's an hour and a half later, we're still going at it. Yeah, we're gonna go under the pump.
We're gonna have one of those systems.
I don't think. Parks and Rec and your GFC.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Darren.
I get a motion to thank Gary. Roll call.
Thank you. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Mary Beth. That's just Mary.
I don't have to sign.
Extensive
I have my
success. Thank you, so also let's approve the application for home occupation license at 45 Maryland Street. Purpose of growing microgrids and setting the solar farmers market with the following conditions. Sales tax inspection. Fire. Will city council Tuesday. June 20th. Okay, item number 2, home occupation at 413 Small Street for the purpose of doing dog grooming. Okay, Ms. Melissa Chandler. 413 East Main Street, Chicopee, Mass. 01020. Is the applicant here? Okay, ma'am, could you come up to the microphone, please? And state your name and address and the proposal, please.
My name is Marcella Shandani. I live at 413 East Main Street, and I would like to open a dog business in my house.
All right, before I read some of the comments or reports, have you done this before? Or
Yes, I am a human. I've been moving for 14 years. And I just feel like it's time to start my own thing.
okay, and do you own the house?
I do own the house.
Okay, you own the house. Okay, so you didn't have experience and because I was. Okay, okay, all right, thank you. Why don't you have a seat? And I'm just going to read the project and reports. And well, I'll read the reports first.
I would hold this for you right away.
But let me just go through this. Okay. All right. If someone pops up on the zoning. We'll give everybody an opportunity.
I
Okay.
like that word.
Application
Actually happens, so.
for a home occupation license for the fire department, there's no issues. This is another report from engineering.
Right.
No engineering comments. And then we have from report from planning. Home occupation license review 413 East Main Street, Township of Here. Applicant requesting home occupation license. Property zone residential A. Home occupation use in this district may be granted. The special permit by the city council under chapter 275, section 52, chapter chapter 275-52, subsection B11. So, planning recommends that the special permit and home occupation is approved on condition. The building department, fire department, health department, inspect the premises and approve. All right, building. Where is- okay. Also had a report from the city clerks. Looks like the real estate taxes have been paid previous. Okay. All right, Lee, can you want to shed any further?
No, I think this one is pretty straightforward. It's a rather large parcel of property. So we weren't concerned about the size of the property at all. And again, similar to the last one, as long as building, fire, and health, which really have the regulatory authority over the appropriate codes are satisfied, then we were in support as well.
Okay. All right, okay, thank you. Okay, looks like there's no public input to the record. Okay, open and close public input. Okay, and I'll second it, but excuse me, Sean, there's nobody on Zoom. Okay, again, I just want to make sure. Okay, okay. All right, Agnes, please come and roll.
Valakir,
Yes.
Kushein,
Yes.
Piniac Costello.
Yes.
Lopez.
Yes.
Zegarowski.
Yes.
Labrie.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Motion to approve the special permit this evening with their. We talk after we put the motion on the floor.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, okay.
Motion to approve the special permit this evening with the restrictions of the building department, fire department, health department, inspector premises and approve.
Okay, I will second that, but we're gonna get some. Okay, go ahead, Coach.
Sorry about that.
No, that's good. That's okay. Go ahead. Okay, sure.
Right, the applicant could come up with a microphone and ask some questions for her.
Sure.
Can you some time on it?
Sure.
I'm Fred Kravitz, I'm the council for Ward 5, nice to meet you, and forward to reading. I guess my questions are, how many dogs do you plan on having per day, how many days a week?
Probably no more than 5 days a week. I want to keep it at 4 days a week, and I'm gonna go by one dog at a time to prevent mass production in my place, and it takes about an hour and a half to 2 hours to feed one dog, so, you know, every 2 hours there'll be another dog, and probably max 5 or 6 a day.
Okay, 5 or 6 a day, 5 days a week.
Probably 4 days a week, I'll work Monday through Thursday. I don't want to work on the weekends.
And what would be the hours of operation?
Probably 8 to 5.
I just wanted to get an idea of, the operator folks are gonna park in your driveway when they.
In my driveway, yeah, or depending on where if I have a shed, I'll have parking on the property.
And you currently have any dogs that you own?
Yep, I don't do dogs.
I guess, I haven't received any calls, about this or any emails, so. Yeah, I don't know what happened to the butters. I don't know if any of your neighbors approached you, had questions.
They did, yep,
All right.
they approved of it and they asked the same kind of questions, hours, and how many dogs there's time and whatnot.
Okay, yeah, I'm, in favor of approving this tonight. I mean, it is something we can call back in, so if it becomes too much for the neighbors and that, they get a hold of me or they get a hold of, someone else at City Hall, then, we call you back and say, you need to cut down the number of dogs or the number of days or the hours or whatever, ends up being the issue. But I'm, in favor of approving it and seeing how it goes for you, and hopefully we'll be successful. I'm all set.
Also, Counselor, okay, any other counselors? Go ahead, Counselor Lopez.
Quickly, congratulations on going on your own. I think that that's commendable, and I wish you much success in your business.
Any other counselor?
I just, I'm voting in favor of this with the special conditions. And, I wish you a lot of luck.
All right. Anybody see anything? Oh, okay.
Sorry, on the board, second, see.
All right, okay, so I think we can roll call. Go ahead, Agnes.
Pelletier,
Yes.
Bushy.
Yes.
Pena Costello.
Yes.
Lopez.
Yes.
Sederos.
Yes.
Labrie.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, let me just sort this out.
To the chair, are you gonna put down the days and the hours and the number of,
Well,
this under the record of it, or?
I think we're gonna just try it without it initially, because we're not necessarily kind of looking for a particular license per se. That we would, and we'll see how this works.
Okay.
And hopefully we can. One of the issues with dogs and parking.
It's not a line of cars coming up.
Yeah.
2 hours. So I think we'll try it that way, but.
Better to be less restrictive at first than most.
Right, we'll give them an opportunity to see how it works, and then we'll. Instead of purposes. So. Thank you.
Speaking for Yep.
Oh, wait, I'm gonna wait for it.
I was trying to be efficient, that wasn't very efficient.
I should feel like you're not doing your job, Gary.
You're welcome. Thank you for the steps. Okay, so
Yeah, so.
hold on, I'll finish. Sorry. Okay, so the motion was to approve the home occupancy license for government at 413 East Main Street, conditions at building fire, health department inspector premises, and approval operation business. This is approved and this one by the committee tonight, and this will go before the full council Tuesday, June 20th, right? Okay, thanks for coming in, good luck. Okay.
Fire.
Excuse me, folks. One thing, we did put the condition that you're gonna have to have an inspection from fire, building, and health department. So if you could get in touch with that or access, excuse me, how does that work? Is that up to the applicant or is that work with us? Okay, so if you folks could call them tomorrow, so you could set that up. And preferably, if we could try to get this inspected before the 20th, that would be good, because that's when we're actually going to, the pool committee is going to vote on it, and the full city council. All right, so if you can call them tomorrow, that would be good. All right. Okay, thank you very much. All right, thank you. Okay, item number 3. Home occupancy application and 13 Warren Street Apartment 2 for the purpose of building a home-based bakery. The applicant is William 13 Warren Street, Apartment 2, Mass. 01020. We do have some documentation in the file, and it looks like this is going to be a withdrawal of the application. I want to just read this in the record. Okay. So this was sent to our office, to Agnes, regarding the comment that's meeting. I'll read this in the record. Anyone that may concern, this was dated Wednesday, May 31st, 2023. Anyone may concern. My name is Morgan Goldman. We signed a letter in the mail about license date. Fortunately, my landlord has withdrawn his permission to the bakery. The apartment, so I would like to withdraw my application. Thank you so much for your 2 minutes. All right, so that recommendation is I think there was a motion to withdraw the application. All right, and I'll second that. Okay. Agnes, please call the roll.
Here,
Yes.
Shane,
Yes.
Piniac Costello. Yes. Lopez.
Yes.
Federowski.
Yes.
Labrie.
Yes.
Thank you.
No answer to big not. It's like I just. Diagnosis. See, that's tremendous.
Moving next year. I feel like whoever. That's quite frank.
The motion was to withdraw the application by the applicant. It's just say, like the land approval, and so go before the full board. Take care of it. Okay. Moving right along, which is great. Okay. Let me just check. I think I have to read all this. Just gonna check the console, excuse me.
Just a minute, yeah, that would just be. G. All the way up. Okay.
Okay. Okay, all right. All right, looks like we can save. Okay, item number 4, ordinance amendment to delete sections, chapter 275, section 41, home occupation, 275 to 2 subsection B, 11, 275, and so 53, 12, and 275-54. Locates on answer section 188-22. Delete. 75-41 qualification. 275-52 11. 275-52 275-54 insert 188 chapter 22. Okay. All right. That says we don't have to do the rest of this. So, it's my understanding on this before opening up. Basically, we're taking this from chapter 275, that's going into license chapter 188. This is more of a license item. There's also leading to the report. This was approved by the planning board, so I also going to this report to the record. Planning board recommendation, ordinance amendment to delete sections 275-41 home occupation, 275-52, 275-53, 275-54, lowercase I, insert section 188-22, home occupancy license, file number 23-7702. The Chicopee Planning Board held a public hearing Thursday, April 6, 2023. The purpose of the hearing was to consider an ordinance amendment to delete sections 275-41, home occupation, 275-52B. 11, 275-53B12, 275-54B1, lowercase I, insert section 188-22 home occupation. The applicant is at large. It's this City Council Office, City Hall, Annex 274 First Street, Chicopee, 3. Recommendation is approval, and approval is ordered for a favorable recommendation of this. So I think. So. I'm not sure if we have some discussion on the floor.
Mr. Chairman, can I discuss that?
We do. alternate, yeah.
Okay, and I'll second that, okay? Okay, go ahead. Councilman.
Yeah, the reason, as you're gonna see. As you're gonna see, we're talking about G here the most, and what I am concerned about. If a non-owner of the property is the applicant, permission must be obtained in writing and submitted with the application. As you just voted on tonight, you did 1, 2, and 2 applicants tonight. One was a homeowner, but I was glad to see that you asked if you own the home, because that a lot of us rent homes too. So this is very important because I do have a tenant that's wishing to do this, but it's not just that. You got to realize that before people were giving them, and the insurance companies of these buildings are required to know about this. So it puts the city as well a liability giving something that shouldn't be given without the permission of the landlords. So this is, I think this is a great thing that we're applying now. That's important for all of us, for the landlord and the other tenants of a building or a home that they own. So that was just to put that in there. And we did 2 of them tonight just at home. So we didn't have it before in language. So I thank Council Ian Curry for putting it together because I think it's critical for landlords and other people to protect these.
Okay, thank you. Susan Lee, do you want to give some perspective on this as well?
Sure, and I would also just like to say that I appreciate the opportunity to work on this with Attorney Garvey. So right now, the way that home occupation licenses work is they require a special permit, as you've seen tonight, in addition to the actual home occupation license. So from a resident perspective, it creates a lot of confusion as to which form they're supposed to use first. And traditionally, I've advised people that we need to start with a special permit and the home occupation follows. But this will really simplify and streamline the process by letting it just go to the license committee instead of it coming to the zoning committee. I can sort of understand why historically that was the case at home-based businesses that were more salons, things that would generate a lot of traffic. It would make sense to have a debate about land use, but as we've seen through the pandemic, there are so many more people who are allowed to work from home, and they may not have a home-based business, but their employer may be allowing them to work in the home office. And I didn't want to see us get into a point where we're being overburdened by people questioning whether or not they're required a home occupation license for their home office when they're working for an employer in another community. So I think I'm happy to see this. The board understands that the world has changed. And I think it'll just streamline the process for particularly entrepreneurs who are looking to start something that maybe will end up being a brick and mortar thing in the future.
Okay, all right, okay, I'll open up to other councilors if you have some questions or some. Okay. All right, so my recommendation is to approve this. This is also going to have to go back to ordinance. Okay, so we will not have complete control over this, but again, talking to council, dealing with somebody which has been on this committee for several years. I think this is much cleaner. This is much easier. So, keeping on chapter 275. And for this license chapter 180. So, okay.
It's already on the course.
Maybe we can open it. Yeah, it's okay. And yeah, I'll just write this up. Now, excuse me, Dan, am I gonna have to put something in here that also has to go to ordinance, or is it just motion to approve?
Motion will approve when it hits the floor. You'll describe what happened here at this meeting, and then we'll refer it to ordinance.
Okay,
That's what we'll do on the floor and next Tuesday.
okay, all right, thank you. Okay, so I'm just gonna write the motion to approve. Okay. Agnes, can you just-
Valakir,
yes.
Kushein.
Yes.
Piniac Costello.
Yes.
Lopez.
Yes.
Zagorowski.
Yes.
Labrie.
Yeah.
Building sound. Order. But must be on.
I wasn't good, but I.
Thank you, George.
I'm awesome. Well, you just throw it in, or a big company outside. Just scroll, do it. I'll do the last. And then I fell to ashes.
Okay, so we had a motion to approve. I listed this as the above reference proposal. Home occupancy license. Special license, city council required home occupation. Special request required immediate audit application. Public hearing. Be set by the city council. Problems in the first office. For the record, this is for the full council on June 20th. Tuesday. Thank you. Yes, you got one more. Okay, item number 5. Ordinance amendment to chapter 275, section 9, to add new language to chapter 275, 9, section 275, 9, chapter 275, 9, acting 275, notwithstanding anything to penetrate special permit language in chapter 275, section 67. No conversion of commercial center over to lapse a period of 3 years, including such time required to pursue the waive termination of any appeal from the grant. If the substantial use has not sooner commenced except for good cause, or in the case of a permit for construction is not granted by such date except for good cause. Following such lapse, rights for the special permit will be reestablished only after notice of the new hearing is specified in 275, section 10. So I have the reports here. Looks like I have a report from the planning board recommendation. Ordinance amendment, chapter 275-9. And new language, chapter 275, section 275-9, 23-7701. Chicopee Planning Board held a public hearing on Thursday, April 6, 2023. Purpose of the hearing was to consider amendment to chapter 275, section 9, and new language to chapter 275, section 9, end of section 275-9. The applicant is very performing at large, address. City Council Office, City Hall, Annex 275 First Street, Chicopee, Mass. Recommendation approval and approval with the voter approval of this recommendation. Okay. All right, hold on a second. Before I do that, let's just have input from Lee. Okay, go ahead. Lee.
No.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Valakir. So I am thankful that Councilor Leclerc was willing to work with me on this one. So all special permits in Chicopee currently have a 1-year lifespan. The state zoning law allows for special permits to have a minimum of a 1 year and a maximum of a 3-year lifespan. The council has seen a number of projects that have been permitted through the mill conversion and commercial center overlay district and multiple renewals over the past few years. And really, those renewals are necessary because of the competitiveness of the financing programs that these developers are going after to fund these projects. Generally speaking, projects that we see come through mill conversion are large-scale, multi-million-dollar projects. And because of the competitive nature, particularly of federal and state financing programs, these developers need to be fully permitted at the local level to be able to compete strongly when they apply to these programs. And so what we're seeing is that because of how many programs are out there and how many applicants there are, it's taking multiple rounds for developers to secure resources from these programs. And that is delaying construction, which means that they haven't taken action on their special permit, which is why they're coming back to the council. So our perspective has been that we would rather have our developers focusing on putting together their strongest proposals to these financing agencies so they can compete at the peak level that they can without having to worry about their local approvals expiring because they haven't taken action. We know we'll have another project that will likely come through conversion in the somewhat near future, which will be a View Royal property if we select a preferred developer from the RFP that's on the street. But really, the effort here is to allow our developers to compete for financial resources without having to worry that their local permits are expiring because it just takes 3 to 4 years to line up these resources.
All right, thank you for that perspective. Councilor Plan? Okay, all right, before I open it up, dovetailing your comment, I want to use an example of Steve Conley's project on 10 Southwood Street from Culture School. With the VOC that we talked about last time. And in order to get permits, credits, and funding, that took several years to get that. So as Lee referenced, these are very big projects, multi-million-dollar projects that just take a lot of time. But I'm going to put a call on the motion and discussion.
Motion to close public input.
Okay, and the motion closed, put in. Sean, we don't have anybody, right? No. Okay, all right, this didn't get. Okay, all right, okay, Agnes, please call the roll.
Leclerc,
Yes.
Rushing,
Yes.
Pena Costello, Lopez.
Yes.
Severowski.
Yes.
Labrie.
Yes.
Motion to approve.
All right,
Any second?
yes, I'll second it, and again. I'm gonna open it up on the floor for discussion. Go ahead, Councilor Lopez.
So yeah, I said motion to approve because it just makes it easier for record keeping purposes, but I'm not actually gonna be voting to approve this evening. I do believe that, perhaps we could find some middle ground, maybe if they had asked for every 2 years. But I do think that every 3 years is a long period of time, things change. If we look at the lifespan, for example, the pandemic we just had, right, like that over the span of 3 years, a lot of things changed. And we have to look at circumstances, traffic, the area, what else is happening around the area. Maybe we need to be talking to those developers about some changes. Residents come in and they have concerns. We just saw it actually happen with the Belcher School project. And so although for some of us, So we had enough information, felt like we had enough information, it still gives the public opportunities to come forth and ask their questions and get their questions answered, and if things are changing in their community, they can express how they feel about that, so I'm not in favor of this, it feels like less transparency, because also this is an opportunity for those developers to come in and let us know where they're at. And as a board, we can assess whether we want to move forward with the project, or we can, every year we can decide whether we want to keep extending it. It's not like they can't come back for extensions. I mean, if they had a set 1 hour, one year limit, where they absolutely had to get started, or else there was no going back, that would be different. But because they can come back to us and we can approve and keep approving for extra years, I'm not comfortable with this year. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Okay, Commissioner, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with Councilor Lopez. I think 3 years is too long. A lot of changes during a 3-year period. We've seen that with other projects that we just worked on recently, including, I think, even the project in regards to the apartments with the brewery. I think some residents indicated that when they got the updated information, there was different facts and figures. So I agree with Councilor Lopez. Maybe 3 years is too long. Maybe we can do a middle ground of 2 years. So I'm just, I'm not going to vote in favor of this. It's too much of a leap from 1 to 3 years. Thank you.
Okay, other councilors on the floor.
Through the chair to lean, the 2 years sound reasonable enough? You know better on the process than anyone.
I mean, I think Councilor Val here spoke accurately. So the Valley Opportunity Council took almost 4 years to line up all the financing for the Belcher School projects. And their plan didn't change through those 4 years. It's just that because they didn't take action, the permit technically expires. I think the risk in what we're discussing here is, if new issues come up after we've approved a project to move forward, and the council decides upon the renewal of a special permit to dramatically change the project, that could also kick one of these projects out of where they are in the queue for funding. So for example, DOC has to line up housing tax credits with DHCD. And you applied 1 year, but you might not get invited to the next step in the process, but you're in the queue. So when you reapply the next year, there's some familiarity with DHCD staff with what you're proposing. But if upon renewal of the permit, the program changes, and let's say, they're in for an application to do 35 units, and the plan changes, and now it's only going to be 15 units, that might kick the project out of the funding eligibility completely. If the council is more comfortable on a middle ground of 2 years, I suppose that's half the amount of renewals that we would need. That's better than, every year. But I've just worked with enough of these people to understand the competitive nature of these programs, and, we've seen it with Brissa. Uniroyal is going to be an even larger project. I just, 3 years on the financing side of things is not a lot of time. And with the competitiveness of these programs, it takes multiple rounds, multiple applications. These are not easy 2-page applications. They require consultants who are writing. So it's a huge investment. And I would say we would want to support our developers in making sure that these public dollars from the state and federal level are coming to Chicopee if we have a worthy project.
Right, so I think the point also is that it's not that the project changed, it's that the neighborhood or demographics of the surrounding areas of the project have changed, that makes it no longer fit. Because it's 3 years of doing nothing, and then the world around it changes, sure, and now maybe it doesn't fit because for various reasons. That's the point they're trying to make. Not so much the projects have changed.
So I will say that, outside of a few parcels, the majority of the mill conversion and commercial center overlay district follows the Chicopee River. And it is these larger scale existing developed properties that are mills. So extending from Dwight and Cabot Hill down to what was Space King. There are, you know, the VOC parcel and now the East Street parcel where the building burned down. Those are new parcels that have been added, but they're much smaller scale. I'm not concerned about those projects being able to line up financing and move forward, but the entity that takes on Uniroyal is going to be applying to multiple federal and state programs, maybe even private programs, and it will take 3-4 years for them to line up financing. We have zoning in place, we have an adopted redevelopment plan for those properties that was developed with intense public participation. Those have been the guiding documents for Uniroyal and FaceMate. They were put in place in 2012. And we've been consistent in honoring those. So, you know, I don't foresee a situation where, you know, we have such dramatic change in a neighborhood in 3 to 4 years. I'm not saying it's not possible, but I also want to make sure that our developers can strongly compete, because in some of these programs, we're competing with developers from Boston, New York City, and, you know, as a smaller community, you know, we're already at a disadvantage.
So one last thing.
Sure, go ahead.
So is there a way to split this up into 2 different chapters where based on the size of the project? You know, like you said, East Street's not a big deal, so you're probably okay, but when you get the larger ones that they have a different, you know, range of time, because like you said, nothing's gonna happen on Chicopee River as far as in 3 to 4 years that's gonna affect that project, but so maybe the way to differentiate the different types of projects. So some that do need those extra years and some don't.
I would leave that to the council and
Is that-
leaving it council.
So that we can.
This also. So if I could just.
We report along. Yeah, so I mean.
Sorry, come ahead, Dan, sorry.
So if you wanna put a dollar cap on it, so
Something that differentiates a project that shouldn't take more than a year, and if it does, it's fine, but the ones that we know are gonna take 4 to 5 years. Let's give them the 3 years before they come back, which also lessens the burden on the council.
I suppose we could redraft the ordinance to reflect something, and I never heard of anybody doing it, but that doesn't necessarily mean we can't.
That's what we do, we create stuff, we fix it.
Well, because where we didn't have a 1 to 3 year window. The state grants us 1 to 3 years to work with, so you'd have to give us a trigger, what is it, dollars?
Right, or maybe location, like they said, East Main, that or East Street, that could change, maybe the demographics around the neighborhood do change. So we want a little control, I agree with you guys are saying, but then down here on the river, it's not gonna change, so we shouldn't burden them with something because of the smaller project where we're being impacted. Do something in the neighborhood, so I would go to the professionalism, knowing what those triggers might be to draft something to maybe differentiate, so we can not lose those big projects, because we don't want to deal with them.
Yeah, I would probably caution around using estimated project value, because, you know, with the economy, same project from pre-pandemic is probably 35% more today.
That's why I think more location, if something within a neighborhood versus in an industrial park,
I mean, you could
that kind of.
certainly consider,
Change.
you could sort, I guess you could think about, you know, the connected overlay district, which is along the river, which would be all those larger properties that we've agreed through adopting zoning is. We want to see them move to mixed use development versus, you know, parcels that may be smaller that are added, the overlay district is added later. But the reality that someone on staff is gonna have to track that. I'm not sure how that would be administered. It would be complicated.
Because we don't try. I'm not willing to lose, you know, $1 billion project because we can't get in 2 years, but I don't want to impact the neighborhood that we apply this overlay, which probably maybe even shouldn't be applied because it's not part of that district. You know, you made it not near the river, it's not built, so how we're applying that, you know, we can, but should be. That's kind of what it's designed for. But if we want to utilize it for what it was designed for, then it'd be nice to be able to have some control where it doesn't affect people, Where the other projects, we're not a lot more money than that, and we're gonna burden them, maybe they'll go somewhere else, I'm not gonna apply it for 5 years, it's ridiculous. And so I'll just find, there's a lot of mills in this state. So so we can lose a big project because we don't wanna work with them, but at the same time, we need to protect our residents and it's smaller, so that's why we need 2 different criterias, so we can get 1 to 3 years or 1 year, 3 years, based on the location of the project.
Or maybe, what's the also for that, so what Trey said,
Yeah, go ahead, Ross.
maybe the suggestion could also be that the way we write it, and we choose to rewrite it, is that at the time that we originally approve the permit, we get to decide how long we approve it within 1 to 3 years. So at that time, the council could just decide, and we would know at that time what it must be.
Also, Council,
Yeah. And I don't know if we want to talk about that.
If I can,
Sure, go ahead, Council.
the concern I brought, it was brought forward, it was what Council, Kuching just said. The cost of doing the applications and staying with that application, not knowing in another year, something could happen with that application. And they spend thousands and thousands of dollars.
You know, we've been out of here.
And I get with Council Lopez, I just, I'll do it 2 years myself, but I'm just saying that if we want to do something, because we don't want to lose these big projects that the people be coming to and saying, well, 1 year, I'm not sure I can do it, and some people may walk away from it. And we don't want to lose it, and I agree with Council Lopez just said that could be the way to do it. But I'm just saying, we need to do something that's big, we really do, and we need a little time to do it.
So back to my question, through the chair, to believe.
Yeah, I think, we could, so if the council went in the way of considering the lifespan from 1 to 3 years, staff could certainly provide you a recommendation based on the review of the project and its scale. And anticipated budget, and we could give you a suggestion if you were open to, 1 to 3 years.
Discretion.
So we're reluctant to 1 to 3 anyways, like the state legislature allows us to do 1 to 3 years. So we're just saying that instead of choosing one specific amount, the council, through the recommendation of planning, but really it's the council's decision at the end of the day, gets to decide the length that that permit is enacted.
Right, so it's an easier way to rewrite the whole thing.
We still would need to,
Criteria and all that.
we would still need to vote this one down though, because that's a substantial enough change. I mean, through our attorney, that's a substantial enough change when this needs to be submitted.
I don't think so. I think you just simply change the language, shall lapse in a period of 1 to 3, so add the words 1 to 3 years as determined by the city council.
Just all right.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Would it be as per the city council, or would it be as per the zoning committee? Yeah, okay. The zoning committee is the one that would be deciding that, wouldn't it? Okay, all right, that's why, because we are a recommending body, I want to make sure that it's not going to be through the zoning committee, it's going to be through the entire.
So the zoning committee does make the recommendation at the time, so let's say that planning committee decides, planning the committee, let's say the planning department suggests that we do 1 for 2 years, right? The council at the table at the zoning committee could decide to go with that recommendation, or could say, nope, we want 1 year or 3 years or whatever, right? That happens at the zoning. When this goes to the full council, the full council can also change that. So the full council could decide, no, we actually, would like to make a friendly amendment to change it to 1 year or 2 years or 3 years. So at the end of the day, no matter what, we're just a recommending body. The full council gets to decide what the time is because it's part of what the full council gets to vote on.
That's the.
Okay, and I just want to make it clear, the reason why we're doing this is not only to encourage the business, but to also listen to residents.
Oh, absolutely.
That's the real.
That's why I posed it,
Yeah, right.
I posed it because I wanted.
Right, that's it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kind of solution to get her to say yes, and that was.
And this was a solution.
There's always a middle somewhere.
There is.
All right, guys, so Vice Council has suggested that we change the period of time, just kind of keep this slightly 1 to 3 years as determined by the city council. Changing that verbiage.
Yeah. So do we have to vote on that amendment and then vote? I believe so, yes, Attorney Hardy said yes.
2 votes, amendment for the amendment and then passage.
Okay, all right,
Motion to amend the motion as stated by the chair.
all right, and I'll second that, okay, so we'll vote on that. Agnes, please call the roll.
Valakir,
Yes.
Shane,
Yes.
Piniac Costello.
Yes.
Lopez.
Yes.
Zegarowski.
Yes.
Labrie.
Yes.
All right,
Motion to approve the motion as amended.
yes, and I'll second that, okay, Agnes, please call the roll.
Valakir,
Yes.
Shane,
Yes.
Piniac Costello.
Yes.
Lopez.
Yes.
Zegarowski.
Yes.
Labrie.
Yes.
Thank you, okay, let me just make this change. Hold on, we're not there yet. Okay, let me make the change, we'll sign off on it, so just give me.
This is my recommendation.
It works.
It's just.
That's the one, but we would take a recommendation on the record. But this is also why we wanted this week, because if it's a holiday festival, we might not want to take that recommendation, so. President, what matters? I think for the most part, we have an issue. We have an interest in one to all of us.
Right.
Change
I know.
Yes.
Because.
I love that.
We're gonna listen to the race. Oh, Bob's trying Up to the big table.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Lopez.
Oh, I'm gonna walk into everybody. Excuse me, sir, we're not done yet.
Let him read it.
Each house is already. I want to throw this thing straight up.
Yeah. I think anytime before 9 o'clock, we can let him home. Early as
Right, okay, thank you. This is also to approve, you know, the reference to language. Notwithstanding the contract. Let me just say. I wish to approve the disclaimers, understanding the contract. 667 on the version, districts allowed 1 to 3 years as determined by the city council for such time as it wants to pursue the right information. Any looking from the grant for substantial use has not seen as except for quick cars or change of permit for construction is not going to Tuesday, except for the cause. Sorry, such lapse the rights for the special permit and the established only after notice. Never hear of this specific permit to set upon the exchange taken. So this was approved. To go before the full committee, full council on the 20th of June, and it's also going to have to. Okay, I'll second that motion to adjourn. Agnes, please call the roll.
Valakir.
Yes.
Shane.
Yes.
Piniac Costello.
Yes.
Lopez.
Yes.
Zegarowski.
Yes.
Labrie.
Yes.
All right. Thanks, guys.